I have the social media marketing agency. My wife's managing it. I'm doing all these other projects, looking for different stuff to do. COVID comes around, Kitcaster being one of these projects. COVID comes around and, of course, shuts down hospitality, shuts down food and beverage. We lost our entire book of business in 2 days for Talk Launch. So, this was, 7-figure revenue, and, we had staff, and I was like, sweetheart, I think this Kitcaster thing has legs. I think it's going to work. And so just pivoted that day, went all in on Kitcaster, boom, rest is history.
I'm Brandon Reed, and you're listening to Ready, Set, Startup, a podcast that brings you industry-tested perspectives from leaders working in all areas of the startup lifecycle, so you can learn from the wisdom that they've gained over years in their fields of expertise and apply it in your own entrepreneurial journeys. Let's get into it. On today's show, I'm talking with Ryan Estes, co-founder and CEO at Kitcaster. Right person, right place, right time. That's how I describe the way that Ryan strategically placed himself and his young company as the COVID lockdowns began in 2020. He and his co-founders saw that podcasting was gaining steam, and they felt that they found a gap in a service not being offered. As they were building the foundations of that business, COVID shut everything down. The now famous podcast hockey stick of growth happened, and his company, Kitcaster, was perfectly positioned to ride that wave of growth all the way to a successful exit in April of 2024. In this episode, we dive into those impressive years of growth and the lessons learned through the process of scaling a service-based business on the back of a fast-moving, budding industry. There's a ton to unpack here. Ryan does a phenomenal job of laying out the complexities and nuances of entrepreneurship into a really digestible package that'll offer insights to any founder, regardless of where you're at in your journey. But before he was building and exiting companies, Ryan cut his entrepreneurial teeth shoveling snow, selling newspapers, and, why not, building HTML on MySpace.
Love of money, I think, really got me there early. So, I probably have a similar story to just a lot of 10-year-olds out there. So I was, shoveling sidewalks and delivering newspaper for the Rocky Mountain News to make a couple extra bucks, which was an awful job. I pushed around this cart at 6 a.m. All my neighbors hated me, and but that got me started. At least it probably gave me a foundation to understand that I can do this. If I set my mind to it, I can get it done. Now, coming into an entrepreneurship career, I wish I had a big inspiration story, but largely I was mostly influenced by horrible managers and terrible bosses that I really kind of realized, boy, I can do it better. I think I can, and so I kind of set out to do that. Probably, when I really started taking it serious, I had what you could call a career in music prior to entrepreneurship. But, I self-released 3 records and, it was very kind of DIY motivated. But when my children were very young, I kind of went to my wife and was like, I stopped doing music and was like, hey, I have an idea for this company. I think I can do it. Is it cool if we do it? And she was super supportive, and it was off to the races ever since.
Nice. Amazing. So what was that first company that you started? Is it what you're doing now?
It is not. That company was a health food brokerage. It was called New Natural. And what I would do is if you launched a line of, let's say, organic potato chips, then I would get you into Whole Foods, I would get you into Sprouts, I would get you into Vitamin Cottage, I'd get you into Wegmans, all that kind of stuff. So basically, we were kind of a go-between for producers and then the distribution. And so we would organize sampling, and we'd do the shelf calls, and that was the business. And it was a tough business. I lasted a couple of years and then had a very small exit to a colleague. But as much as I love health food people are kind of challenging. They like to put on their packaging how much they're donating to the planet and to other people, but they didn't like paying their bills.
Yeah. So no, that makes sense. Interesting. Let's talk about actually even fast forward to what you're doing now. And let's talk about the start of that. And if you started it, did you start it by yourself again, like you did before? Or did you start it with a co-founder, and why'd you make that choice?
let's talk about Kitcaster. Kitcaster is a podcast booking agency that I started in 2019 with a co-founder. And kind of decided on a co-founder largely because, for me to work on a project, it's got to be fun, it's got to be profitable, it has to be of service. And Brandy, our co-founder, had a kindred spirit, and she's kind of the instigator and was like, "Hey, Ryan, let's do a project. Let's do a project." Now, I had met her because she had an HR company in Denver, and I had a podcast called the Denver Business Podcast, and it was a kind of a founder CEO show where I'd interview people about these Denver companies, and she would send me her clients to interview them. And so we kind of clicked, I was like, well, hey, let's try out a business that's like what we do here. I think there's something there. I love going on people's podcasts. I think other people would like that too. So we kind of put that together, launched in 2019. COVID lockdown 2020, when basically there was no sports, there was no movies, there's no TV, there was nothing to do but stare at each other and listen to podcasts. And the company really kind of exploded at that moment. So, 2020, we flash forward to 2025, Kitcaster was acquired by a company called Moburst in April. So right now I am basically the head of growth for Kitcaster by Moburst, which is a very satisfying feeling. We built Kitcaster to sell it. We saw this as an opportunity to create a very specialized service that could bolt on to a larger agency very easily. We resisted the temptation of trying to do everything or doing things outside of our lane and just really stuck into what we wanted to do. And it ended up being pretty profitable for us.
Awesome. That's great. So tell me, when you were just starting back in 2019, was this your only project? Were you doing several other things? Did you have to stop other things to start this new thing? What'd that look like?
Yeah, I'm always spinning something new up. So at the time, my kind of main company was called Talk Launch. And this was actually Denver's first social media marketing agency. So, when I was kind of doing my thing with music, one thing I would do for kind of little side projects is I would do MySpace pages for other bands. So I'd do all the media and then do all the HTML and, kind of learned web development through MySpace, of all places. But I was like, hey, man, actually, I think this could be a job. And so I kind of launched that into this company called Talk Launch right after the Natural Food Brokers. And so, we got some press for people were like, what is social media agency? It didn't even exist. This was before Instagram, it was before Meta was Meta and before Facebook had a whole ads manager, before all that. And so we found some early traction and did well. And we ended up being rather successful in food and beverage and hospitality. So at that point, we had a team of about 5, and my wife was managing that company. So it was allowing me a lot of opportunities to try other things. Some of the things I tried was a natural deodorant company called Body of Work, flopped. But if you look at Native, they launched at the same time. I tried an SMS cookie company called Poppin' Cookies, a cookie company based on text messaging. Exclusively. That's how you order it. So you interacted with the brand was SMS text messaging, and that failed. And, Crumble Cookies comes out of those ashes. So I was always, every time I have kind of a crash and burn, I love to see something in tandem that hits it big. Cause it's like, hey, maybe I'm just not the right person at the right time with the right thing. But you keep taking at bats every once in a while, you're going to get a hit. So anyway, I have the social media marketing agency. My wife's managing it. I'm doing all these other projects, looking for different stuff to do. COVID comes around, Kitcaster being one of these projects. COVID comes around and, of course, shuts down hospitality, shuts down food and beverage. We lost our entire book of business in 2 days for Talk Launch.
Whoa. Wow.
So, this was, 7-figure revenue and, we had staff and I was like, sweetheart, I think this Kitcaster thing has legs. I think it's going to work. And so just pivoted that day, went all in on Kitcaster, boom, rest is history.
So, okay, so that answers my question of like what spurred you into just going all in. I mean, it was necessity. You were like, hey, this is not working, so let's start putting efforts into what is. That makes sense. How did you start? So yes, the world shut down. Yes, people were listening to podcasts. People know that was a big time. There's a hockey stick that happened there in podcasting. How did you position yourself to capitalize on that? How did you make sure that people who were looking for your service knew that you were a solution offering that service? How'd you get in front of your customers?
I like to start marketing with stuff that doesn't scale and then see how I can start to branch out. So in the beginning, there was this kind of like a LinkedIn competitor in the iOS app store. I forget the name of it, but because it had some early traction enough that it was like all these founders, it's kind of a founder connection, like matchmaking LinkedIn thing. And so that's where I did it. Now that's the second step. Let's go back to the first step. So in order to validate a project, I have to make sure it has, legs before I work on it because I will bury my head. Actually, I'm very interested in this is kind of what you do is you build audiences and then find products to serve that audience. So I learned early on that like, hey, Ryan, you're gonna bury yourself with tasks because you love to do it before finding out if there's a customer there. So first thing I did is I called 5 people. These were friends, these were other founders, these were clients. And I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this podcast booking service. What do you think? They're like, it's a great idea. I was like, cool. I think it's going to be $1,500 at the time, and they're like, I'll sign up. And so I sent them a link and they put deposits, 3 out of the 5 people. So I was like, okay, there's something here. And then I started working the pitch. Now, like as far as like sales and like rev ops, that's what I love more than anything. So what's great about like a very singular service, it's very clear to understand from the very beginning. Like we book you on other people's podcasts. Like people are able to understand that quickly. And so then you can just move straight to kind of the value prop and then kind of execution of the campaign. So you can get people very quickly, a high volume of sales calls. So I used that app. I used LinkedIn. I used my network early on, and then we opened it up and have basically kind of experimented with every channel since to see what happens or to see kind of what traction we can find on different channels.
Yeah, that's awesome. So as you are building this company, you're finding some traction in your marketing, figuring out where your customers are. I mean, at what point did you know, something I really like to press into on this show is others founders listen and try to take practical insights for their journey, what they're doing, what they're building, is this really pivotal moment of like, okay, I've built this thing. I think I have something here. Feels like I have some product market fit. Maybe I have some early customers. But I can't, I'm starting to get enough traction. I can't do this alone. Like I need to bring people alongside me. Walk me through that point in Kitcaster and when you knew, okay, this is bigger than just me or just my co-founder. I need to bring people on to support with the team and I need to start hiring. And how did you take that step and then provide the cash flow needed to support that increase in team and structure and support?
You bet. Kitcaster is totally bootstrapped. So, for the first 10 months, I mean, I don't want to say that because oftentimes people will say that, but I didn't take a salary. So I financed it.
Okay. Yep.
But I'm a systems and processes guy. So again, like business is the way I make a living, but it's also kind of a game and it doesn't feel like it's real unless I can show somebody else how to do it. And in order to do that, you have to create repeatable systems and processes, which is particularly hard when there's a service like we had that nobody's ever done before. There's no tool. We had to kind of like hog tie some tools together to make this happen. And then create a kind of a routine that people can do on a daily basis, feel successful about their job and execute. So almost immediately, I started, creating SOPs for the sales process, sales and marketing process, creating sales scripts for like exactly how I want the sales calls to go. And then finding people to do it. Now, had the luxury because Brandy, our co-founder, she also had a gal that worked with her, Katie, who's still with us to this day. She's a director of ops. She's absolutely brilliant. But she was early on we were able to kind of deflect some of the work to her. Immediately, I want to start to build a sales team because I was selling, Brandy was selling, but I want to have 2 salespeople so they compete against each other and we can make it happen. I feel very confident in like always delivering at a very, very high level, but I want to make sure that, we've got a lot of people knocking down the door. So we did. We started, closing like, 7 deals the first month, 8 deals, 9 deals, 10. So we kept growing very quickly, in which case it just became very natural. And we had the cash flow basically just in the wash, to be able to bring people on and hire them. So the first, I'd say 10 months, everyone was kind of contractors. We're still kind of feeling it out like, okay, like this feels really good. We should do it. So then we dove in, brought in payroll and did the whole thing. We kind of made a commitment early on that, our full-time employees were going to be in the States. We also use contract work offshore, but we're like, you know what? There's a lot of nuance in the products and the understanding of like what people are wanting to go on podcasts about. So I think hiring locally would be a really good idea. So we did that and grew very quickly. The team was up around 25, I think in like 2022, and we're at about 8 now.
Yeah.
So, a lot of mistakes along the way of figuring out like really how to execute on this, but I think that's also pretty standard. I kind of always have grace for founders that, get in over their heads and have to like backpedal a little bit because it's part of the process.
Yeah, sure. It sure is. And you learn a lot in that process. As you were getting started and you said, there wasn't really anybody out here doing this. You didn't have any certainly no framework in which you could just kind of fall into and build your business on the back of. You were hog tying these services together. But it's now a thing, right? Like people are out there, people are doing this. And that started over the last few years as that was happening. And you had people coming into your space and beginning to create that competition. How were you differentiating yourself? What was your moat? How did you carve it out?
It's true, and I have a podcast and I get pitched all the time and I always like to look and be like, wow, it's kind of cool. I kind of feel like a pioneer in the industry a little bit. But at the same time,
copy pasted from what I use.
Oh, you've seen that too. Where you go to a website, you're like, wow, that is my exact web copy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I can't say that it doesn't hurt my feelings sometimes. It's like there's that Charles Mingus song, and the title is, "If Charlie Parker was a gunslinger, there'd be a whole lot of dead copycats."
Yeah, right.
That's the name of the song.
That's the name of the song.
I was like, wow, okay, yeah, I kind of understand that sentiment.
Yeah.
But also, I'm a firm believer that if I'm going to do something, I'm only going to do it if I can be the best in the world at that. I'm not going to make cola because you can't beat Coca-Cola. You just can't. So it's like, if I'm working on something, I want to be the best in the world. And I saw opportunity here that we really could. And I think we earned that, So when we started looking at kind of what's our ICP, we wanted to be like razor thin. We wanted to be exactly the people that we know they have a need, and that we can reach. So for us, it was funded startup founders, it was entrepreneurs with exits, and it was C-suite executives. And I felt like I had a superpower and an advantage largely because I was an entrepreneur with an exit and I was a funded startup founder. So I felt like I could relate to our ICP in a way that would resonate, or at least I could just talk to them as colleagues.
Yeah, that makes sense. So as you're building the business and you're growing it and people are coming into the space, getting a bit more competitive, what can you remember, Ryan, was one big bet that you took in order to grow the company in those early stages? And then what gave you the confidence to do that? And what'd you learn from that risk? Did it pay off?
Yeah, I think the first one was probably a rather large marketing expense at the time. It was $2,500 a month. And basically it was like, it was a LinkedIn service, where they would just reach out. It was kind of a mix of automations. Is before really a lot of the LinkedIn automations came through.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn is an interesting kind of channel for lead acquisition because it's hot and cold. So at this point, nobody was really using it like that. And it was red hot, so we were spending $2,500 a month first couple of months, like, it's kind of a big lift for us at that time, but it really paid off. So advertising and marketing for us, which was kind of a yin and yang with me and Brandy, our co-founder, because she is risk averse, I would say, and I'm just, foot to gas all the time. So we have a nice kind of like give and take. So it was a little bit of convincing. I was a bit out over my skis being like, hey, no, let's get on YouTube. Let's get on, do meta ads. Let's do the whole shebang, and create funnels and like bring people in. But because we had kind of demonstrable success and our close rate was so high, once we could find and we could get our customer on the phone, explain to them, what we can do for them, our closing rate was through the roof.
Nice.
So it felt better like opening up the channels. Now, we also had a lot of noise, because you start advertising on YouTube and then suddenly you get a lot of rappers that have mixtapes they want to promote,
Yeah.
and I think that's a great place to do it on podcasts. We just weren't the agency for that. But I think that was probably it, just taking a big kind of like leap of faith with marketing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, those are scary. Those big outlays there at the beginning, especially for unproven services and unproven partnerships. That's tough. So
Totally.
those are things that you're investing in and you're growing. What can you kind of identify as those? We talked about 2020 being a hockey stick moment for podcasts in general. What were some of those moments for you as a company? Those hockey stick moments could line up with industry growth like that. But were you kind of some pivotal moments where it took your company to the next level?
Adding bodies early on was humongous. We had one, two, three. We had three account executives, plus I was still selling. We had, a dozen plus campaign managers. So this was hard for me. Also, I'm a lean and mean kind of guy, probably a solopreneur at heart. Love software largely because low body count, high margins. But, we kind of took a look at what we were building and we're like, the way we scale this is butts and seats, and we create a really solid culture and we make this fun. So, that kind of cultural phenomenon that we had was extraordinary. Like it was just a really fun atmosphere. And one big thing to me, I think for kind of creating that culture is I started out by saying, hey, there's no such thing as podcast emergencies. We're here to work. We're going to work hard, but this is a transformational experience for people that really understand what kind of tool this is. And we're there to be nurturing and supportive. And we're facilitating this butterfly effect throughout the universe, which I think amplifies positivity and change. So at the cornerstone of kind of, the culture that I wanted to create was like this real sentimental corniness and wholesomeness about like the importance of like people having conversations like this. So I think the cultural shift, it wasn't a shift, it was kind of rooted from the team in the beginning, but like the belief we had in each other and the strength we had and the fun we had. I suppose this is also kind of a product of COVID because your workmates became like your social pod. Like, okay, well, one of us gets COVID, we all get COVID. So, it was a very kind of communal feeling that I think really helped the company.
Interesting. Awesome. So as you were growing and building, more people were on board. Did you ever need to go back and raise any funding to continue the growth, or did the cash flow support the business as it grew?
We did. We took a loan through Stripe. I think we borrowed like $250,000, and then we borrowed, I think, another $150,000.
Okay.
Which is a little bit of a gamble. Like we paid it back no problem. It was a great facilitator of growth for us. But I've met other people that kind of get in that like spiral, that death spiral of debt, particularly with Stripe. Now, I think I probably would have continued doing that many more times, but the money got a lot more expensive with that Stripe operation. In when it was probably 2021, when they first had those kind of initial offers, money was cheap. It was great. And so, borrowed that, paid it back, went in for a double dip, and I was like, price has gone up 30%. Like, we'll take a little bit, but then we decided not to. So this is probably 2022, and then we have kind of the reversal of the market. If we saw that hockey stick, 2022, if you remember, it's like all the tech companies are laying everybody off. Plus you have VC is drying up because Silicon Valley Bank goes under. There was just kind of like a cascade of events that really ran all the way up into this AI hype cycle where AI has completely reinvigorated tech again, and like it's really popping. So, at that point, we had a kind of a crossroads. It's like, okay, well, do we raise? Do we take a loan? How are we going to facilitate the growth we need? Or do we just like figure out how to squeeze as much EBITDA as we possibly can from what we've got? And that's really the direction we went, is like to like really kind of make our processes super tight, to bring in automation as much as we possibly can, to really kind of be on the front edge of what they call AI now. Back then it was machine learning and automations a couple of years ago. It's kind of funny, but and so that's what we did, is just kind of tighten up operations.
And that's an interesting point. That's an interesting decision to make with the. It's. I guess my point is that it is critical at that moment to have a North Star, which you guys had, of like, we're building this to sell. And I think that would
Yeah.
really inform decisions like that of like, do we keep making money, or do you just buckle this thing down and get it grown as much as we can, as lean as we can, until someone, knocks on the door or whatever, until we're ready for that moment. So that's interesting. You spoke just a moment ago about culture, about how you guys built really fun atmosphere. You guys really had a strong culture early on. As you grew, continued to get more customers, more butts in seats, people were continuing to come in the door. How, Ryan, did you foster the initial culture that you set out to create, kind of that vision you started to go into of why you guys were doing what you're doing and why it was important in the world? How did you communicate that message to more and more people and really foster that culture as you grew?
Yeah. I think it was a mix. It was very intentional. It was a mix of like some horrible culture I had that I did not want to reproduce.
Mm-hmm.
Tyranny, essentially. And then a mix of culture that was absolutely so fun. I wanted to reproduce that. However, take out all of the addiction and sorrow. So I,
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
I was the founding music director of a legendary jazz club in Denver called Dazzle.
Okay.
And it was dream job for me.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was the best. We would produce like 12 shows a week, and the staff was amazing. But it's this classic, like, if you've worked in the restaurant or club industry, it's like you go a little too hard.
Yep. Yep. Sure. Sure. Yeah.
So what I wanted to do is create kind of a celebratory feeling, not to sanitize. You want a little bit of danger.
Sure.
So I'm big with piñatas. I like piñatas. We like to party a little bit, but I'm also very careful to say, like, hey, people are going to bring beers, you're going to do whatever, but this is not compulsory. I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
drink probably ever. But feel free to, or not. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
totally up to you. We're not creating an alcohol culture. I think that was
Mm-hmm.
really helpful early on,
Hmm.
particularly when we're spending like dinners together and stuff like that. It's like, hey man, we're not trying to get hammered here. I'm going
Yeah.
home.
Right.
I'm going home early and whatever.
Uh-huh.
So I think, taking that component out was really helpful. Also, I'm big on like, you know, wanting staff to be happy without overdoing it. I'm not like we're a big family kind of guy. Like, it's the Kitcaster family. It never comes out of my mouth. It's like, no, I respect you guys as individuals, and if we could be friends, that's great. But like, we're all here to make money. Like, let's be clear. So as fair as I possibly can be with everybody is the basis of our relationship. And I think being open about that like. Only because I think when people say we're a family, they're trying to sell me something.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what are you trying to sneak something by me because we're
Yeah.
family? Be like, nah, man,
Right.
we're colleagues.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
So I think that helped too. And I also I talked about that, and I talked about like entrepreneurship a lot, and I talked
Hmm.
about what it means for these companies and what it means to found a company, and like encouraging them on their projects and their side projects. So
Hmm.
we ended up being kind of like this great outfit of like creatives that were, involved in the music industry, or they were, making movies, and it's just like a really fun kind of creative group.
Cool. That's awesome. What's one thing, you talked a little bit about the different funding paths you took. First, it was bootstrapped. You decided to take some financing as you went to continue that growth. What is one thing you wish you better understood about the funding process before you got started?
Oh boy, I still have to like look up on GPT what all these
Yeah.
deal structures and three-letter
Totally.
acronyms all the time.
Totally. Yep.
Like,
Yep.
wait, what?
Yep.
Just when you figure out what a safe is, you got to learn three others.
Totally.
I studied like philosophy and history in college. I really wish I would have studied business.
Hmm. Yeah.
I saw the curriculum. My daughter's going to Mizzou in the fall. She's studying finance, so it's like she has a class called Excel. She has a class called Accounting for Small Business. She has, and I'm like, dude, this is money. This is
Yeah.
good stuff.
Right. Right.
This is stuff I had to learn the hard way,
Mhm.
So I probably always have a little bit of a like underdog mentality. I have some early pictures of how I would take notes, and it was like runes it was like literally runes where somebody was like, dude, what are you doing? I was like, well, this symbolizes that. They're like, why don't you use a spreadsheet? Why why do you need a decoder ring to understand your marketing plan? but that's like really how my brain would work. So it's taken a long process, an educational process of maybe understanding the fundaments of business. That's been it's still really rewarding. I love it. I mean, business entertainment, maybe it's why I love podcasts so much, is like I feel like kind of my favorite thing right now, you know? It's just hearing these stories of how people do what they do.
Yeah, you certainly sit at the intersection of that and what you're doing, business and entertainment. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Let's talk specifically about operating your business. We talked about the growth of it, the establishment of it, the growth of it. What's one thing, Ryan, that you continue to go back to is sort of just a maxim and a gospel truth that you find you consistently come back to over and over that proves itself out in operating your business?
Man, I was gonna try and do my best not to mention the Roman Empire and Stoicism, but I
Why?
can't because that's a I don't know. There's just like a Venn diagram of conversations I have that are
Yeah,
like
yeah.
founders and Stoicism, and it's a perfect
Nice,
circle.
nice, nice. That's funny.
But I think operationally, just understanding that like you're gonna have highs, you're gonna have lows. Don't take either too personally. Don't be too
Hmm.
attached to your thing personally. It's very, very difficult. Also to understand, like, do the hard things first.
Mm-hmm.
What's the thing that you're like, you don't want to get to it. It's like, do it first. Get it out of the way. Um, Not because it makes it any easier, but it makes the rest of the day a lot better. So I think I'm kind of a simple guy, and I just need kind of a simple maxims. So it really is like I wake up and like, what do I not want to do? And I dive right into that.
Nice. I love that. I think that's widely applicable no matter what people are doing or where they're at in their stage of building. That's great. What's a word of caution that you can offer to founders who are right now actively in the process of scaling their company? They've built it, they've established it, they've got some traction, and they're scaling. What's a word of caution you can offer to them?
A word of caution when you're scaling. Maybe it's the opposite of that. Like the contagion of success is unbelievable. When you're on the top of the world, boy, you really feel like it. Your meetings are smooth and people are paying attention and there's opportunity and you're promoting people and it's really intoxicating. I think like, right now, probably the most important metric is revenue per employee. So like, how can you maximize the most revenue or EBITDA even, per employee that you have? The temptation is to spend the money, but don't do it. Put that in your pocket. You just you're holding it for a minute. So
Hmm.
there's a fine line there because you do have to invest in the company in order for it to
Sure.
grow in certain aspects. But there's a temperance there that I think just comes from understanding yourself a little bit, and seeing when you're a little bit too excited. At
Yeah.
least that's how it shows up for me, is if I'm a little bit in front of myself, then I'm like,
Yeah.
you need to slow down. We need to get back into these spreadsheets.
Right.
We have to slow it down. So I think that's it. Enjoy it. You're scaling and you're on that hockey stick ride. Enjoy
Hmm.
it, but like, it doesn't last forever.
Yeah.
Every business has a beginning, a middle, and an end. This
Hmm.
is this is just the reality. So, enjoy it while you got it.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's wise. So you said you just recently sold and had an exit with Kitcaster. What was something that you wish you knew when you were first starting to navigate that process that you could share with other founders maybe in that similar stage?
Probably when you really feel like you have product market fit, you got traction and now you're scaling, that's the time to start the sales process.
Hmm.
You know,
Interesting.
People are not going to want to hear that. I wouldn't have wanted
No,
to hear
that
that.
seems early. Why do you say that?
Um, it probably depends on what you're doing. If we're talking about what I've got, little service-based business, we didn't set it there. There's a ceiling on what you can actually do.
Sure.
Now if you're venture backed, this is obviously a completely different thing because
Sure.
you're already
Sure.
hell bent on changing the world. But most entrepreneurs, not even founders seems to skew tech based.
Hmm.
And so they're going to be looking at software solutions and there is no end to their scaling capabilities. But I think most entrepreneurs, they're servicing a very select customer with a very select service.
Hmm.
And particularly now where you have, services of software and you have a lot of AI functionality that's displacing different kind of services or different kinds of software. that now if you're starting to really see that traction, like start looking, especially because, when you're sitting in and you have that kind of leverage to show like, hey, we doubled, tripled, doubled, then your valuation is going to be much, much greater. So I think also this is going to come down to like a gut check of what people want. A lot of entrepreneurs also, they just want a lifestyle business. We're like, hey, I'm the founder guy. Like this is who I am. And I love doing it. So they don't need to worry about that. But if what I'm saying is appealing to you, like you see business as a game and you kind of want to collect wins and see it kind of bounce around and do fun little quirky cool things, it's like when you really begin the process, it takes a year to close a deal like that. So that's what I would say.
Begin it early. Yeah, no, that makes sense. At least start to kind of be thinking in that direction and be setting things up like we were talking about earlier, making decisions with that in mind so that you're ready for it when the conversation starts. Makes sense. Let's move into a couple closing questions here. When you speak with other entrepreneurs, which I know you do a lot of, other founders, what's a question that you get asked the most? And what's a question that you find that they're not asking, but they should be?
I used to get a lot of, what's the return, which is kind of an interesting question because it's like, well, the difference between when you're talking and when Brandon's talking is radically different because you're a pro. But I don't get that anymore. I think that like this kind of dialogue is self-evident, especially with the rise of short video. Like podcast clips absolutely kill it on short video. So people aren't really interested in the return. I think most people, what they want when they're coming to me is they're like, can you get me on Lex Friedman, Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss,
right?
How I built this, So it is interesting to hear that because you'll have somebody who's a self-published author and they've got a company and they want to be on Joe Rogan, and like I hear it a lot of times, and I'm always like, well, do you eat elk and smoke DMT? I mean,
right, totally. You got to start there. Yeah.
So. But I think, and I really try to analyze what it is. Is it that they want to be famous? Is it like there's a desire for them to have adoration, which I understand. There's like that, like, in Buddhism they talk about the hungry ghost, like that has a hole in their chest and they can't fill it enough. Like you're looking for something. There might be a little bit of that, but I think the other thing is like, founders and creators, I just love them so much because they're so in love with what they've got. Either it's a solution or it's a problem. One of the two, that they're so enamored by it. They're like, I have to tell as many people as possible. They have to understand this, and so they'll bring that passion. And I want to just focus that into the right direction. And sometimes there's a little bit of explanation of like, listen, your data security software for IT developers, I know that you love that, but I don't think Joe Rogan's audience is too interested in that.
Yeah.
So let's find a home for you. And that's kind of what we do. And what is very satisfying, because if you can find the passion in somebody and match it with an audience or a podcast host, that might be the only place in the world where they're able to really express what they love. If you love NFL football, and you live in America, you're in a good spot. You could talk to absolutely everybody. But if you love data security for IT professionals, there's not that many people that want to hear it. And frankly, your partner, your husband, your wife don't want to hear about it anymore.
Right. No, totally. But podcasting offers that really, I mean, this is one of the so many valuable things about this space, but one of them is, that there is a group of people out there that somebody has curated and cultivated, and they have their own show, and they're talking to people who care about that thing that you care about. And so finding that match is what I'm sure is critical in your business. Imagine that you woke up kind of at the start of your career. You retained all the knowledge that you have and that you gained over the years, but you're back there at the beginning. How do you spend that first week of your fresh start?
I love that question. So kind of what do I know now?
If you could start again, but have this knowledge that you have now, what would that chapter look like for you? What would you start with?
Oh boy, I'm thinking of when I started back, how naive I was, how much I believed in myself. For some reason, I had no business to do that. What do I know now that I wish I could tell myself then? I think it would be that you can go further than you thought. You can work harder than you thought. You're not tired when you think you are. You could actually have the capacity to handle an extraordinarily heavy load. You can handle it. You can manage it. You actually should seek it out. Like all the responsibility you can possibly put on top of your shoulders before you collapse. That's it. And you won't collapse. That's what I tell myself. I think when I was coming up, had a lot of fun, did a lot of fun stuff, but I kind of shirked responsibility as much as I possibly could. And I think it didn't create the kind of meaning that I feel like I'm lucky enough to have now, whether that's family relationships, as business relationships, as friendships. I now want to be the guy to show up with my pickup if you need help moving. I'll be that guy, So I think that's what I tell myself.
That's awesome. That's great insight. So lastly, I have for you here, what's kind of one tool or quote or book that you found indispensable to you, either personally or professionally in your progress and career?
Can I just take something super esoteric and weird?
Yeah, man. Throw it out.
Okay. I love this book. I've read it like 10 times. It's called The Origin of Consciousness in the Bicameral Mind by Julian Jaynes. And it's just so bizarre and psychedelic about how language might have birthed not only like intelligence, but also birthed religion and deities. And and for me, like kind of these excursions into like, it's an incredible concept. But I love stuff like this. It can't be proven, so it just kind of provides like this like little release to kind of look around and be like, what is all this? It's helpful for me because I spend so much time in spreadsheets.
Yeah, no, like to tap back into the mystery and be like, I don't have an answer for that. I don't have any quantifiable data to prove this or that. And you like that. A lot of people are very unrested by that, but you like that kind of mystery, and that's neat.
I like it.
Yeah,
that
cool.
UFOs,
That and UFOs. There you go.
UAPs.
Some people would say you could prove UFOs, but I mean. That's good. Ryan, this was super valuable. I appreciate you taking the time, man. There's a lot of really, really hard-earned and hard-earned insight and really good wisdom packed full here. I appreciate you sharing that with my audience.
It's been an absolute pleasure. I really appreciate it.
If you guys enjoyed the show, leaving a review is the best way to help others find it. Second only to sharing it directly with your friends and family. Thanks so much for helping get the word out. Hit me up at brandon@readysetstartuppod.com if you have additional questions about a topic I covered, have suggestions about another area you'd like to see me dig into, or just want to say hi. Please reach out. I'd love to get in touch. Keep imagining, keep creating, keep inspiring your spheres of influence with what you're passionate about. The world may just need that dream that's in your head. See you next time.